I would like to introduce Evelyn Cusack. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. You're all very close. I'm not used to looking at people. When you present the weather, you're like in a really small studio and there's nobody there, so you are kind of almost talking to yourself. But I'm trying to distract now from myself because the beautiful images here, if you can see, this is from the International Space Station, which is passing overhead as we speak. So they're kind of live-ish anyway, live. We said we'd try and do a live image. What could possibly go wrong? So that International Space Station is 400 kilometers above the Earth, and I'm going to really tell you a little bit about the atmosphere and obviously leading into the weather, which is how you all know me. And I'm not sure how it feeds into the festival here, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we forecast the weather. I'm not going to go into AI too much because I think we're all sick of it before it's even started, but it is a developing thing and it's going to be the latest in forecasting. So I'm probably even out of date as I stand here. But anyway, my name is Evelyn Cusack and I am trying to flick on, and I'm from Clonaslee in County Laois. It's actually in the wrong county there. The reason I mention I have Kilrush there, my mother is from Offaly in Kinnity, but she was lucky enough, her aunt was a housekeeper of the parish priest in Kilrush a long time ago, so she got to go and live with my aunt, and that's how she got a secondary school education. You know, we're going back to the 1930s, and then she got a scholarship to do teaching, so she became a national. So you know, she was very lucky there. But like the difference between Kilrush and Killaloe is enormous, and I'm sure every time you see a red warning for Clare, you just go. Because you know you're practically really the Midlands here. But anyway. Well, there's quite a difference between the weather in Kilrush and Killaloe, really, I think. So what else have I got there? Rockhew, that's where my father is from. And I've done a lot of talks. I enjoy talking. And now I've just seen the time here, so I have 13 minutes left. But this is the first time I've actually come to talk by boat. So so my captain is down here, so give Dick O'Reilly a big round of applause here. But we said we'd take a trip down the Shannon to celebrate his birthday. Now his birthday is 9/11, the 11th of September, but that was last year, so we just had to make the trip in before his next birthday. So anyway, I'm looking forward to tomorrow as we're going back to Banagher, because that brings back memories of my dear father, who you may know about Banagher from that lovely ad, which brings a tear to our eyes. The late Peter Caffrey, you know, the actor with Lion's Tea, and that's still on the rounds. I think it's a favourite Christmas ad. So I look forward to seeing Banagher tomorrow. We'll be dining out tomorrow evening, so if anyone has any recommendations. So let's get on a little bit about the weather. So if Earth were the size of an apple, the atmosphere would be no thicker than the skin. So it's hard to really imagine that, how thin the actual atmosphere is. In fact, I'm just going to flick on. Now, this is not to scale at all, but if you can see there, troposphere, that's the first layer. If anyone here believes in a flat Earth, it's time to leave now. You'll just be too annoyed. Okay. You'll just be very annoyed with me. So the troposphere, trop is from the Greek for kind of turning. So the Earth rotates once every 24 hours, so it kind of drags the air around with it. But I don't know if you can read it there. It's up to about 12 kilometers. So the troposphere is where all the oxygen is, where all the water vapor is. It's essentially where the weather is. Now here we are. Where is 12 kilometers away? Emily told me earlier. Nina. Yeah. So Just think about it. You could actually walk to Nina, or run if you're more energetic, run to Nina. I don't know how long it would take you. But that's literally where the weather is. And even think of 12 kilometres. What height is Mount Everest?
8.8.
Who said that? Carmel. Are you a geography teacher? Excellent. Well, who the hell can go up Mount Everest? You know, a few dozen people. So while we live in the troposphere, we can't even live in it. You know, we only live in a small part of it. So as you go up and up and up, the air gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And the stratosphere, which is the next layer, you've probably heard of the sudden stratospheric warming. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. It's far too crazy. But that's further up, and there's very little oxygen at all there. And the stratosphere is where it's very important because it's where the ozone layer is. And have you heard of the ozone layer? So some of the oxygen escapes up to the stratosphere. This is very, very interesting and important. And the UV from the sun, as it's coming down, interacts with the oxygen. You know, oxygen is 2 molecules, O2. So the UV breaks up the O2 into single oxygens, and then one of those single oxygens atoms joins with an oxygen molecule. So O2 plus O equals O3. Now, that's called ozone. But the reason why that's so important is to make that chemical reaction, you had to use up some of the UV from the light. And what's a byproduct is heat. So that chemical reaction heats up that area of the atmosphere, but most importantly, it has destroyed the UV. And it was only when this whole process started and the ozone layer was formed that allowed complex life to develop down on Earth, because the UV kills you. Look, you know about UV with sunburn and skin cancer, and that's only a tiny amount of the UV that's left that hasn't been absorbed by the ozone layer. If that ozone layer never happened, you wouldn't be here. I wouldn't either. There wouldn't be any plants, there wouldn't be any grass, there wouldn't be any potatoes or red wine, there would be nothing. So we need the ozone layer. But in the 80s, scientists, when, you know, satellites that are sort of giant cameras in the sky, were noticing the ozone layer was thinning out. Okay? So it's the first time really that there was immediate action by all the governments in the world, because with the ozone layer thinning out, it was allowing in a bit more UV to get in. And if that ozone layer continued to thin out, all of life on Earth would die, right? So they think, oh, we better do something about that. It wasn't theoretical, it was actually happening. And so what was causing the thinning out, I'm seriously looking at that time, was the CFCs from refrigeration and from aerosols and hairspray. That was actually destroying the ozone. So it was a very good example when all governments got together. Now we're going to zip through, I hope. Oh yeah, sorry. So the first that I only found this in the summer, 1676. This was the first real written down forecast, if you like, given to the Royal Society in London. And the writer, a little bit pompous, said that we had a very warm and dry winter, and the vulgar were predicting that the autumn was going to be harsh. So, but it didn't turn out that way. But I just thought it was very interesting that even in 1676 that people were given out about the farmers trying to predict the weather. So, you know, I'm going to zip through now the difference between science from nature and then tell you in about 2 minutes how we actually forecast the weather. So this is actually, it's called a halo. Do you see the little weak rainbow around? It's a halo. Now, maybe a couple of 100 years ago, again, people would be terrified of seeing this, but that halo is just like diffraction of sunlight through ice crystals, and it's a sign of a weather front coming in. So usually when that halo was seen, the farmers would know that there's rain on the way. Now that wasn't like a making up thing, that was correct. That was a physical thing because the halo was as a result of increasing cloud ahead of rain, okay? So that's correct. Now, the little froggy is looking out at the rain, which is fine. You know, he says, yeah, it's raining, but he can't predict rain next week, okay? So, no, sorry. Now, here's Bill Murray. So, Puxton, do you want to hear about that little groundhog, what happens there? So I think it's in the Midwest. Now, by the way, it originated in Germany. It's nothing got to do where it is. It's just all those guys emigrated over there. So just to put you right, it's like it drives me mad here in Ireland, people saying about Saint Swithin. Saint Swithin is English, isn't that right, Jeremiah? It's nothing got to do with Irish weather. But anyway. Puxatony Phil, they take him out, right? Take him out. And if you can see his shadow, the winter is going to continue. Now, do you know why? Do you want to know why? Because if you take out, pretend this is him, and the sun is shining, then you'll see his shadow. Okay? If they take him out and you can't see his shadow, it means it's cloudy. So there's a little bit of truth in it because they're in the middle of, a winter high. So there's really cold winters and the anticyclone high is producing the cold weather. If the cloud is in and the rain, it means the Atlantic is broken through. So the weather is already broken. So if it's sunny, they're just saying, well, the cold weather is going to continue because it normally does continue. But I mean, there's no guarantee. It could change like tomorrow. So it's kind of so there's a slight little bit. It's called persistence forecasting. That's what it is. Again, going back to my father, if there's a lot of berries around, it's a sign of Mother Nature, looking after the little birdies. Who's our next speaker about nature? So, it's a lovely thought. But Mother Nature doesn't care about the birdies. The reason, as we speak, like millions of little birdies are being savaged by rats and foxes, etc. The reason there's a lot of berries on the trees is because it was a really good spring and a really good summer grows. So, but often or occasionally, it may well have been followed by a cold winter. So then the farmers would say, there were a lot of berries. So, and the same, I better run through this red sky at night, chapters of life. There's a little bit, it's a sign of an advancing weather front. So there is a little bit. But I just want to say about the berries in particular. Correlation does not imply causation. Now, that's a very fancy way of saying the berries does not imply that Mother Nature is providing that it's going to be a cold winter. Is that all right? So it's a correlation. Berries may have been followed by a cold winter, but it's not causing it. Okay. Now, Boyle's Law, that was the beginning of the scientific age in Ireland. And we still, do you remember Boyle's Law from school? Am I causing some PTSD here? And then, did you watch the programme on the transatlantic cable last week? You missed it. Yeah, so really, I think it's on the RT player. The transatlantic cable was laid in 1854, and it joined America and Ireland and then all the rest of Europe. And really that was the internet of its day. So while we were starting to take professional observations, using thermometers and barometers, there's no way, you would have had to get it sent over by boat, which would have taken, 3 months? So it wouldn't have been of much use. Like the weather that affects Ireland, normally now in a westerly, is over America 5 days earlier. So that's why we have to know what the weather's like in America, because then we can predict it, turns out. So that was really the internet of its day. And we belonged to the empire then.
But with the transatlantic, not the transatlantic cable, the transatlantic flights in Foynes, that was the start of Met Éireann, because we were set up then in 1936 to provide aviation forecasting. So that's just down the road. So I just thought it was kind of interesting. So zooming in now to the current conditions, there's a graphic of the Earth, and there's about 10,000 surface observations, 10,000 weather stations around the whole world. There's weather satellites which are flying above. There's weather radars, and you see the little balloon down there? There's weather balloons. So this is how we do modern forecasting now. We don't look out the window at all. Well, although it probably would help. So we have our observations, and then we create what's called a mathematical model of the atmosphere. We subdivide the atmosphere into imaginary little cubes, like the Rubik's Cube. So we do it at the surface over the sea, and then up through the atmosphere, up through the troposphere, remember that? And we kind of interpolate the weather in each of these little cubes. And then using... Oh, I broke it. Whee! And then using the very fancy equations. One of them is still Boyle's law. That's the reason I showed Robert Boyle. And a big supercomputer, we project the weather forward in time. Now, there's no computer big enough in Ireland for the Met Éireann model. So we're joining with some Nordic countries, and we've bought our own supercomputer. It's in Iceland. And the reason we've picked Iceland is to be very green, because it's going to be powered by geothermal energy. So I know. Because a supercomputer, it really isn't green, So we end up with, your fancy apps. So I'm going to frisk every one of you later and check that you have the Met Éireann app, okay? None of those all fancy ones. Now, we're all the end of a summer. It was a bit of a washout, wasn't it? And here's our group, the Roving Souls, and we have Dennis Gill. So a big round of applause for Dennis, who's our leader here. So this was us in Lugnaquilla in the middle of July. Look, and there's Killaloo, because as I was preparing my talk, I said I'd grab this image. It's just too funny. There were weather warnings out for wet and windy weather at the August weekend. So that's what it was in Killaloo. I was going to talk about Storm anyway, and I haven't got to it. So 1 minute. 1 minute, okay. So you may have heard us now talking about storm naming, haven't you? So we've only really started this crack since the 2015. But for about 200 years, mariners have been naming hurricanes in the Atlantic and typhoons. But the way they name those is if they're hit by a hurricane, which is a bit late, they named it after the saint on the day which they were hit. You know what I'm trying to say? So, but what we're trying to do is name a storm before it hits. Now, hurricanes in the National Hurricane Centre, all hurricanes and all tropical cyclones are named, they're all out in the Atlantic, and they're done by one central casting agency, the National Hurricane Centre. So, but in Europe, we only name weather events if we're expecting them to hit. So there's loads of storms up in the Atlantic, but we don't name those. So all the national Met services in Europe, we've siloed into little groups. Instead of using all one set of names, because how on earth would we agree to one set of names? We couldn't possibly. That's one reason. And another reason is, we want to use a few Irish names, and, the Greeks wouldn't agree, They think they were a bit queer, those names. So we have little groups, but the only rule is, and it's a very simple rule, if one National Met Service has named a storm, use that name. Because, with social media now, you don't want the same storm having different names, which has been happening. And so this is the latest, for the latest season. So I used to be looking after that, but I'm not anymore. Woohoo! Because I'm retired a year ago. So
We miss you.
oh, thanks. I don't miss you. Sorry. I miss you, but not the work. Okay. So we only name a storm when we expect orange or red impacts. Now, we do get a lot of complaints. That wasn't a real storm. You know, nothing happened in my area. So I do bite my lip from saying, I'm sorry your house wasn't blown down. But, you know, fingers crossed next time. But, you know, not being facetious, I mean, we don't want to be given the boy who cries wolf warnings, you know, so it is important. But thankfully, we don't get too much severe weather in Ireland. I know after the summer we've had, but it was just boring and dull. Like, there wasn't much severe weather, thank God, you know. So we don't get hurricane. Where's the wood? we don't get volcanoes, so that's definite anyway. And we don't really get earthquakes, just little tiny baby ones. And we do get some thunderstorms, but we do get not hurricanes, tornadoes, but just very baby ones. But they can be dangerous enough, and they come out of cumulonimbus. So I'm going to finish off now, and that's prop. Now it's bad luck to open an umbrella. We're all scientists, so there's no such thing as bad luck. So I'm just showing you, the Meteorological Society is a sort of just a voluntary organisation, and we exist to promote meteorology. And we're launching our new umbrella. Very fetching, isn't it? So these are all those fancy equations that you saw that we use in our modelling. And if you're interested, these are arriving in about 8 weeks' time. And if you join up for 2 years, we're going to send you out an umbrella. Well, it's very expensive. Very expensive. It's €10 per year. So if you're interested, get an umbrella.